be running through today is kind of the foundation of our Smarter Cities partnership, what that entails, what it looked like starting out, why we went this path, and then we'll take a fairly decent dive as the Smarter Cities values apply to various programs. So if we could get to slide 2. So this is where we started. Here in the city of Knoxville, we were looking at challenges that were facing our residents, specifically as it relates to their housing and energy efficiency. And we had many, many older houses, as most communities do, built to old standards, if any standards at all, depending on how rural you are, and the codes that are applying to you. The energy efficiency issues that we were facing, I would say, are probably not uncommon, and I'm going to try to draw a lot of your attention to the idea that while this is something that we've been successful with, I think is fairly easily replicable. A lot of it's manpower, person power. So we were looking at this aging housing infrastructure. We were looking at spending literally millions of dollars for assistance in utility bills, and 2012 is kind of the pivotal year when we were forming the Smarter Cities Partnership. And in 2012, we had spent over $4.8 million, and we really think of that as kind of a Band-Aid, and that we were spending some funding on weatherization and energy efficiency, but it was very limited compared to the amount of immediate utility bill assistance. So we were never actually meeting the need to close that cycle on utility bill assistance programs where you pay the bill, but you're not necessarily doing anything to improve the house that the person's staying in, so you have this perennial problem. So where we started on slide 3, you'll see one of the early meetings here. And in 2012, the Smarter Cities Challenge grant brought in a team of IBM experts to help Knoxville look at our energy affordability problem. And it was really looking for root causes and innovative solutions. And the team was fantastic. They looked for new ways that we could promote short-term solutions, such as utility bill assistance, but also how we take a long-term view and invest in the energy efficiency and housing stock. On the next slide, we've got the Stakeholder Council members. So this initial group, the Smarter Cities Partnership, was formed with a variety of perspectives. Obviously, these nonprofits and agencies are going to vary depending on where you look at, but we had representation from foundations, local government, federal agencies, nonprofits, consultants. So we're able to leverage a wide array of experiences, perspectives, skill sets. And when we convened those groups, we really started looking at, or asking them, what the success looked like. And on slide 5, that's kind of the summary of where we landed. So this broader vision of what are the general ideas that we'd want to get to, and that's community-wide coordinated approach to utility bill aid, really getting to that root issue, not dealing with the Band-Aid solutions. And that involved a lot of housing upgrades, meeting demands for improvements, especially for those that can't afford to do that but need the assistance the most. And then really develop stronger partnerships. The recurring theme that we've seen in this is that all the partners are willing to do the work. It's just getting on the same page, and a lot of times, the devil's in the details, and making sure that your messaging is the same is one of the barriers that we keep seeming to have to revisit and come back to. So the structure that we came away with on slide 6 is a cycle. We never really saw this as being something that would end, so much as get to a point where we can revisit it, fine-tune things. So what you're seeing here is the overall vision accountability is held by the Council of Stakeholders. That Smarter Cities Council is the one that's providing constant feedback, perspective to our staff and the community partners. And the way that workload was broken up was under 4 different working groups. So we had a data working group, funding working group, an education working group, and a landlord engagement working group, and that's that foundational chart there at the bottom. And obviously that was going to require a lot of input from the public and be a very public platform for us to, one, educate, engage, and move forward. So the recommendations that came out of this on slide 7, and this is reflective of conversations from working groups, from the Council of Stakeholders, is that we need to develop one voice around the shared vision. And one of the most iconic activities that I can think of in recent memory was we were looking at, could we all agree on 5 to 10 tips for residents to undertake that would be low cost or no cost energy efficiency upgrades. And we started doing the research and asking all of our partners, send us your list of tips, and we must have had at least 20 different lists of varying tips, and it might be set your thermostat to 65, set your thermostat to 67, but somebody seeking assistance was hearing a different story depending on who they talk to. So consolidating that messaging across a wide array of partners is really going to help make an impact because you're all saying the same things. Harness the data was another one of those recommendations, and really enable fact-based decisions. I've got an example of that a little bit later, but we had a lot of community groups, churches in particular, that want to assist their parishioners, and they would be making charitable contributions to households for people that were suffering from not being able to pay their utility bill. Well, that's fantastic, and we want to leverage that, but there's really no way for us to track that effectively. So it's hard for us to measure our success of intervention without opening up communication with those groups, and that's one thing that we've really tried to make a concerted effort, is creating systems that can track client assistance and then get those people into other programs such as a weatherization assistance program or an education program that can hopefully have a much broader intervention. Educate the community. We'll go into a little bit of this more. That's been a critical component. Enabling people to take control of their own utility bills is the core of what we do. Funding the program, I would say we've been very successful at getting funding, and we continue to work with our local partners to come up with new tools and mechanisms to fund weatherization, utility bill assistance, data programs, whatever that is. We're really that convener of personnel. We step in and pinch hit as needed, but by and large, we're looking at supplementing the efforts of our partners and making sure that they're really stronger as a result of our work. And then educating landlords and community associations. At the end of the day, if you're not engaging with landlords, especially in low-income communities, that's going to be one of your biggest barriers. So your program has to make sense from a landlord perspective, and the easier that you can make it for someone to participate in that, the better. We've recently been doing some new program controls to try to get more Section 8 households into one of our ongoing projects, and it's been very successful. We've had a couple of public meetings where we've told them about the program and incorporated their feedback. And the first one, I think we got 80 landlords, and then the next one we got close to 120. So it was a growing room. We were having trouble meeting the sign-up demand. As soon as they heard about it, they all wanted to send in applications to get their homes into the program. So let's get into some of the details here and kind of show you what we've been doing. So on the next slide, there's a map. And this is one of our tools that we've developed using the data I'll wait on that to pop up here. But we were identifying the need, and in Knoxville there are over 5,000 lower income households that were in need of weatherization. The map that you're looking at is a method that we use to identify areas of intervention. It's more or less a heat map. What this is a indicator of high probability of areas of need for our KEEM program, the Knoxville Extreme Energy Makeover Program, which would be the primary focus of the talk today. And areas that are in green are those most in need and most likely for us to see applied interventions, door-to-door campaigns, mailers, and then those areas in red are predominantly areas where would be a last resort, or we would least apply ourselves, and those are our more wealthy neighborhoods with newer homes or much wealthier residents. And what you're seeing is that many of our neighborhoods that are low wealth on this map are also closer to our downtown. So we wanted to be able to fine-tune the tools that we use to reach these neighborhoods. And when we started off, the demand to be able to get this intervention on the ground through weatherization assistance funding, so the WAP programming, only allowed for about 30 homes a year. And that leads us to the launch of our program last year, the Knoxville Extreme Energy Makeover, which we have a picture of our first home on the next slide here. And this is Miss Ware, this is Dorothy Ware, and our mayor, Madeline Rogero, at our kickoff event. And this is 100% the result of our Smarter Cities Partnership. It's a program funded by TVA, and they awarded Knoxville $15 million to implement one of their extreme energy makeover projects. And we were one of the larger awards, and we were selected based on the fact that we had the partnerships, the communication, and all the groundwork laid to be able to essentially offer a turnkey solution for a funder to get a project on the ground. And that launched in August 25th of last year. So what is KEEM? And on the next slide, we've got some of our auditors and weatherization folks out in the field. KEEM, the Knoxville Extreme Energy Makeover Program, is looking at providing retrofits at no cost to residents. It's funded in whole by TVA, and the goal is to achieve a minimum of 25% deemed electricity savings. We use local contractors as the retrofit agents, and our Community Action Committee here, who houses the WAP program, their auditors do the pre and post. The goal of this program is really to make improvements that allow families to live more comfortably and see a lower electricity bill. Each project is a custom work order, essentially. We don't go in with a prescribed, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. It's more or less based on what the home needs. Now, we've got some overarching program goals to keep cost at or under $10 a square foot. So that is one constraint of the program. It's hitting the 25% minimum savings, deemed savings, within that cost parameter. We currently have 10 contractors that are working with our Community Action Agency to implement these upgrades, and we also are able to tap in and get them tapped in with the TVA, QCN, their quality control network. One of the essential principles, program components on the next slide is our education. So coming out of the Smarter Cities Partnership, getting out on the same page with all of our partners was essential. One of the ways in which we did that was in 2014, we got a grant to subsidize the cost of developing a consolidated education program that we call Savings in the House. And quick tips to cut your utility bill. That's the logo on the bottom left, and savingsinthehouse.com is the landing page for it. Through this, we were able to get our larger partners together, get their feedback, come up with some essential no-cost tips, identify our demographic, come up with some nice graphic design, and fund some initial outreach. So we did door-to-door campaigns to begin with. We did community feedback. We went out and had focus groups to really find out what were the primary concerns, what were the barriers from a community perspective on initiating the change in their household to take control of their utility bill. And that's an essential part of the KEAM program. So through Savings in the House, which has been rolled up from that initial launch of our Smarter Cities Partners as a key program component in KEAM, every person that gets a KEAM upgrade is required to go through an educational training, a 1-hour on-the-dot educational training, and that's provided by the Alliance to Save Energy using our Savings in the House presentation. And you'll see our instructor on the bottom right and a grainier version in the top image on the far right there, and that's Jennifer with the Alliance to Save Energy. All in all, we've done over 200 education workshops, and we've had over 1,200 participants over the past 18 months or so. And the satisfaction rates, the feedback from people right now is about 97% satisfaction. We've got a couple people that may disagree, but by and large, the one shining light that we have in terms of perfect or near perfect feedback has been the education. People feel much more empowered upon leaving to exert some sort of agency in their home to control their utility bill. And this focuses on turning lights off, making sure your vents aren't blocked, a fundamental or a foundational knowledge of how their utility bill is generated, how to read it. It's a low-stress environment for them to ask questions, and it doesn't have representatives from our local utility. So it's a third party giving them this information and using very supportive language for describing what leakage looks like and where the areas where you can find, and do your own sleuthing in your own home to figure out the causes of inefficiency. So on the next slide, these are some of the participants in some of our education efforts. So for the KEAM program, we ask people if they're really feeling the program helped them and they'd like to put out a yard sign, they're welcome to do so. So they will put yard signs out in their front yard so that they can advertise to their neighbors. We're very careful in language. We didn't want it to seem like it was a detrimental thing. We want it to be a more of inclusive, inviting phrasing. So you won't see anything about, we're getting help or, I qualify for whatever. It's we're saving energy. You want to find out how to join the team? Give us a call, go to our website, whatever that is. And one of the key aspects to success is engagement. And on the next slide, you'll see some of our door-to-door efforts. So really reaching back into the Smarter Cities Partnership pool. One of our nonprofits, a local nonprofit that works on essentially workforce development for out-of-school youth, has been a critical partner for doing door-to-door outreach. So as part of their job training, they're taking out-of-school youth, they're talking to them about professionalism, they're talking to them about jobs and sustainability especially. That's one of their focuses. But what they do with the students is we would contract with them to go do door-to-door outreach in neighborhoods that would typically be lower income. So those densely creamed communities that you saw on the original map, these students would be going door-to-door and inviting people to check out Savings in the House, learn more about KEAM, and then they would have a workshop typically within about 2 weeks So they would invite them to that. So they make that point of intervention and then say, we'd love to see you at this workshop. And we saw tremendous turnout in our workshop numbers as a result of that. And on the next slide, you see some of our neighborhood ambassadors. So another valence to our engagement and outreach activities is asking people that are somehow involved in the program. And some of the folks that you see in this shot are actually participants in the program. And they loved what it meant, they loved what it stood for, and they wanted to take part in it. So we took on a neighborhood ambassador program and really invited them to come in, learn more about how they could spread the message of savings in the house and how they could spread the message of KEEM during this short window that the program's going on, and allow more of a peer-to-peer exchange and allow really community leaders to tap into their own contacts. And those neighborhoods where it's a little bit more difficult for us to get into and get our message out, these are people that are more than willing to do that for us and help break down those barriers. On the next slide, here's our summary of the year one accomplishments. And this is just a simple little infographic, but in the first 12 months of KEEM, we've had a total of $6 million invested in Knoxville. $4.5 million of that went to local and small businesses. Essentially, the remainder of that investment went into bulk purchases and staff costs. And for customer impact, we had over 600 homes in the first year. Right now, we're at about 820. The 3.7 million kilowatt hours there is based on deemed savings. And we've had more than 1,200 participants. So you're looking at the number, you're saying 600 homes weatherized and more than 1,200 attendees. We invite all members of the community to take place in education. So what we found is, especially when we do door-to-door outreach, we're getting folks that come in with their neighbors or a family member to share that message, and we encourage that. So even when we're making this mandatory, it's a good mix of folks in the room, people that may not even qualify for the program but are just interested in learning those tips. And on the next slide, we've got some energy savings samples. So this is a random home. We're at a point now where we're starting to mark homes so that we can do a more rigorous analysis. But this is a random home that was pulled, and the bar on the left is pre-intervention consumption on a monthly basis, and then the bar on the right is the post-intervention. So these are all weather normalized. So one of the tools that we use to analyze how various homes are performing, we actually go into Energy Star Portfolio Manager, if you're not familiar with that. It's a federally managed tool to benchmark buildings. It's not necessarily the best methodology, but it is an industry standard methodology that we use and allows for various reports to be run. And we know that we're applying essentially the same methodology as we would on our government buildings. So it's a standard that we accept, and many, many other individuals accept. So one of the feedback items on the next slide from TVA when we got the award was, this was a no-brainer. This was really, the partnerships made it hard to dispute that we weren't ready for this level of funding. And what you're seeing on this sheet are all the local partners that have been critical to our success. Now, at the core, we've got our 5 key partners. We've got TVA, we've got our implementer, which is our Community Action Committee. The city is obviously involved. to provide some administration and oversight. KUB, Knoxville Utilities Board, is our local power distributor, and then the Alliance to Save Energy, who have been the critical partners for the success. But when it comes to getting messaging out, when it comes to getting program feedback, when it came to the original design, it's all founded on the input of these agencies. And we were able to rapidly deploy and build a lot of community trust and leverage our partners upon award, which we've heard from a couple of other implementers, and not to say that they're not doing a fantastic job, but they've struggled getting that message out and getting the partners on board. We were already geared up to make something happen. On the next slide, one of the long-term solutions coming out of Smarter Cities Partnership that really got kicked off about the same time that TEAM was happening is Rounded Up. So our local utility distributor, KUB, fantastic partner, they stepped up to the table. They've been really willing partners through the Smarter Cities Partnership, and they wanted to be one of the first agencies to put their money where their mouth is. So they came up with a Rounded Up program, which is actually an opt-out program, not opt-in, but opt-out. And it's a round-up billing program. They're fairly standard, but it's contributed more than $1 million to essentially supplement the WAP programming. And what that allows our local implementer to do is go from roughly 30 homes to anywhere north of 80 to 100 additional homes, depending on funding. It's got a 66% customer participation rate. Again, it is opt-out, and there have been a lot of discussions here recently about integrating this into the more DOE type program. So TVA has a lot of interest in looking at how something like this would exist in other areas, in other municipalities or other distributor areas. So we continue to have very positive discussions about how that would develop. But this is our long-term solution. Obviously, it's not the only path forward or the only tool that we're looking at developing, but this has been one of those critical ways that we are able to ramp up the help network here. So with that, I think that puts me right at about 30 minutes. I'll wrap up here and take any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you, Brian. I know here in the room we were busy taking a lot of notes. There's a lot of good information shared. Our first question for you is, what is the process for acquiring the energy data? Did you get permission from the individual homeowner or go through the utility?
So whenever somebody enters into the program, for them to receive assistance, they sign a waiver saying that they will allow us to access their utility data. And once they've signed that, and that form was approved by our local utility, we look at a 12-month utility history anyway to ensure that they qualify and that they've, the house hasn't been just vacant up until the past month or so. And then we, from a programmatic perspective, we can make a request directly to the utility to pull a larger. So in the case of whenever we're benchmarking a home, as we're doing some of those more rigorous tests, we're running 36-month histories on a home to get essentially a 2-year baseline and then a year past the point of intervention if it's available.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder to our participants, there is a Q&A button on the top left-hand corner of your screen. In case we have people joining us who are traveling or just on the phone, I'm going to go ahead and unmute the lines in case we have any questions that want to be asked that way. But before I do that, we did just get one more typed in. Could you, Brian, define an end-to-end education campaign?
An end-to-end education campaign? Sure. So I'll describe our original campaign, and for clarification, I'll leave out some of the feedback mechanisms that we took early on for program design. But when we're launching a campaign, if we're really pushing this out, such as program launch, we sought partners from the community that would be able to assist us in messaging and doing additional outreach, and that's where our local nonprofit that did the workforce development came in. We did have other people that would be willing to step up if they weren't able to fill that role. And we were doing door-to-door campaign outreach, kind of a porch light. If everyone's familiar with that Peach Street model, that was a big inspiration of ours. We would do a door-to-door campaign, hand out the Savings in the House flyer, hand out information about our team program, invite the person to an education workshop. It was meant to be kind of a quick hit. So don't be obtrusive, don't push yourself on people, just make that initial connection, invite them to essentially a community level event, and then host that workshop within about 2 weeks, depending on weather in that community. We were hitting 300 homes essentially during each push. People would come to the workshop. We were getting about, for 300 homes, somewhere around 70 to 100, depending on weather, depending on the neighborhood, actually turn out to the workshops themselves. A presenter there, the Alliance to Save Energy, would give 1 hour to the dot. We were very respectful of people's times. Presentation on Savings in the House, which is our essentially no to low cost tips. And that presentation usually runs about 45 minutes, and then 15 minutes are spent intensively talking about potential next steps, of those team being one, but there are also avenues for people that may have more income at their disposal that may be able to take care of something like an e-score program through TVA, which is more of a rebate. So they get all the information that they need to make an informed decision. If they're interested in making contact with one of our client services people for the bigger workshops, we'll often keep someone on hand or reserve someone from our community action agency, so that if somebody wants to fill out an application or have questions about the process, we've got staff on hand to deal with that. And rarely do we do follow-up because we don't want to be obtrusive. So we invite people to come out to future events and really try to develop a community around that. So that's what a campaign would look like. Not a whole lot of follow-up, but a lot of front-loaded outreach activities. In a more passive campaign, we would do mailers, and what that allows us to do is we're able to hit a broader group of people. We're able to cover a lot more households, but one of the things that we've been able to target through that is on that map on slide 3 or 5 or whatever that was, if you want to thumb back through that and look at your slides later. In that map, what we were able to do is actually get all the electrical addresses from our local utility. So we have an internal map that has all the plot points of electric-only addresses, which is one of the program requirements. So we've been able to vet high priority areas, low-income census tracts, and electric-only addresses, and we were able to vet by age of the home. So we've applied this methodology to really kind of fine-tune areas where we would expect to run into higher levels of energy burden. And we can send highly targeted mailers to those individuals. So we can provide a list of addresses of those households that meet the home age requirement. They're in a low-income district and they have the utility service that we're doing outreach for, and get that into their mailbox.
Great, thank you. Next question. This program is focused on low income, but do you have a website or provide materials for homeowners who do not qualify for that program?
right? We've got essentially a one-stop shop, which was a IBM recommendation whenever they came through. So our point of intervention, we send people for education purposes to Savings in the House, and that provides very general information. Our KEEM program, if someone comes in and they don't qualify, we have our DOE program, we have the KEEM program, we have the Rounded Up program, we have LAHEAP, all that's essentially in one house. So if somebody qualifies for one and not another, they can get a referral basically without having to do anything. It's a consolidated program in that regard. The assistance for other programs, like if they want to know about eScore, we talk about those at the point of education. Whenever we do our community presentations, we actually talk about low cost and then higher cost things that they could consider doing to their home in ways that they could get rebates for that through TVA, Energy Right Solutions, or eScore, for instance. So we do that, but generally we just have click outs on websites for that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and unmute the line in case we have any callers on the phone who would like to ask a question.
Sure.
You are now unmuted.
All right. Does anybody on the phone have a question for Brian?
How is the program administered? I mean, you really haven't touched on the structure of your office and how many people are actually employed to conduct the program.
Sure, great question. We provide our office at the city, we were one of the critical agencies in writing the grant, and we provide some kind of high-level oversight of the program, but when it comes to day-to-day operation, that rolls through our community action agency. So they're WAP implementers already, so they already had auditors on staff, they already had construction contacts on staff. Now we had to gear up a little bit for this, and I think all in all we added 3 positions for this. One of those positions, we've got one full-time position here in our codes department that's dedicated to helping the KEEM program. We've got a part-time coordinator, and then they've hired an energy auditor and 1 staff, so 4.5 positions that we needed to ramp up to be able to implement this. Now this is kind of an extreme case in that we're talking about going from 30 homes a year to essentially 600, 700 a year. So naturally we were going to have to staff up a little bit, but the drop-off won't be as severe as it was, during ARA. So programmatic-wise, our community action agency staff, they're juggling WAP, Rounded Up, and KEEM. They have 3 auditors right now, I believe. They've got 5 client services people, and I want to say they've got 3 or 4 in construction, but none of those outside of maybe 1 or 2 positions are actually dedicated to KEEM itself. So it was leveraging existing resources. We weren't, putting up a storefront, staffing up with, 20 some odd people across several teams for the purposes of just this program. It was leveraging existing resources whenever we were kicking off. Does that get to your question?
Yes.
Any other questions remaining? All right, well, we have Brian's contact information as the last slide in the presentation if you have any thoughts or questions come up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the webinar today. And a special thank you to Brian for taking the time to share some of these energy efficiency programs with us. Our next and final consistent messaging stakeholder meeting will be in person on Thursday, January 5th from 12:30 to 3:30 p.m. It will be held in Richmond, but the exact location to be determined, and there will be a call-in option. We'll be sending an agenda around shortly. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.